Welcome to Self-Publishing with ALLi, proudly sponsored by Publish Me, helping indie authors succeed globally with expert translation, tailored marketing, and publishing support. From first draft to international launch, Publish Me ensures your book reaches readers everywhere. Visit publishme.me. And now, here's your host for Self-Publishing with ALLi, Dan Holloway.
Hello and welcome to the first self-publishing news of meteorological winter, or indeed meteorological summer, depending on your hemisphere. And first, and with huge thanks to one of the team here at ALLi, just to clarify, I think Howard will have added a note to last week's podcast, but to clarify that when I was referring to Fictly, the social reading app, the spelling of Fictly, it was PHICTLY, not to be confused with other apps or platforms of the same name but different spelling that do, as I was informed, highly different things. So if you are going to go and have a look to find out whether you want to sign up for Fictly, make sure you go to PHICTLY and not anything beginning with an F. Always good advice to follow, I find. So, that aside, what has been going on in the news since then? The most interesting thing I have found has been a fascinating study of American media habits. A lot of this refers to non-book related things, but there are some really, really interesting things about audiobooks and also about newspapers, magazines, in general, the kind of media that people are consuming and social media. And so what are some of the takeaway headlines? Well, the really interesting takeaway headline is that 5% of Americans listen to an audiobook every day. That, to me, seems like a huge number. It's a smaller number than the 93% who use social media every day. But nonetheless, thinking about all the things we hear about how people aren't reading, or is the growth of audiobooks slowing down, and we'll come to some evidence that that might be the case, it is none the case that these really, really regular listeners, the ones whose listening generates the most income and the most listening hours, that's a large number. That's however many. I'm going to try and do the maths. That's more than, well, it's between 10 and 20 million, isn't it? That's a lot of people who are listening to audiobooks every day. And it's not quite as much as who listen to music every day. So the figure for that is 42%. But that's in itself is an interesting comparison. So if we think of Spotify, and there is quite a lot on this, in this survey on Spotify in and of itself. But if we think of Spotify as a music platform, but also an audiobook platform, that sort of gives you an idea of the relative size of each of the two parts of Spotify. So audiobooks is more than 10% of the sort of the overall audio streaming ecosystem. So that's not insignificant. Given how huge music is, that is not insignificant. And Spotify, the survey also found, is the most widely used audio streaming platform. So take all of that together, and there are a lot of audiobooks being listened to. But one group in particular are notably absent from audiobook listeners, and that's the over 50s. So, a very interesting sentence in the survey: failure to engage this age group appears to be holding back growth of the medium. So, audiobook growth in general, they suggest, seems to be slowing. And one of the main reasons why it is not continuing to grow apace is the fact that over 50s are just not really getting on board with audiobooks. So there are opportunities there. There are opportunities to fill that gap. There is certainly an increasing, or still a huge amount of opportunity for people to make a decent chunk from audiobooks. But there are also some significant challenges. And obviously, given the genres that different age groups are drawn to, so also in this survey, older listeners and older media consumers very much drawn to certain kinds of non-fiction. Audiobooks are clearly going to be more or less attractive an option to writers in different genres. So that's interesting times in the world of media consumption. Talking of digital media, very interesting. At the end of last week, I brought you a legal case, Sora versus Sora, as I called it. And this is the news that OverDrive is suing OpenAI, and they're suing OpenAI around the name Sora. So Sora obviously has been very high profile recently. The text-to-video generative AI app became the most swiftly downloaded app in history when it was released on iOS and Android. And that has changed basically the way that sites like YouTube, or the content that sites like YouTube present to people. It's single-handedly, I know I don't want to get into trouble by saying any one firm is single-handedly responsible for coining terms like AI slop, but it has made it possible for people to generate content of questionable value, whether that's intellectual, technical, craft, whatever kind of value, and then to flood various platforms with that content. Nonetheless, it has clearly been a game changer for AI and for video, and it has been very, very high profile. What the developers of Sora, the generative AI app, possibly failed to appreciate was that there was another a slightly more long-standing, very well known in our circles platform also called Sora, and that is the platform that OverDrive uses to distribute ebooks to schools and colleges. So OverDrive obviously is the main way that we get our ebooks into libraries. Lots of platforms we use as indies can distribute straight to OverDrive and thence into libraries. And by using OverDrive, we can also benefit from the Sora network, which will get our works into, in particular textbooks, into schools and colleges. And Sora have basically told OpenAI to stop using the name Sora and to remove all references from the internet, from worlds virtual and real, to the word Sora. One of the interesting things that I hadn't picked up until I read through some of the stories was the iconography involved. So Sora is the Japanese word for sky, and both the OpenAI icon and the OverDrive icon for their respective Sora apps features sort of cutesy sky-related comic content that isn't a million miles away from each other. So you can see that there are some interesting similarities here. Let's just go that far, and without getting into any further potential trouble, let's talk about a subject that could get you into a lot of potential trouble, and that is poetry. So I am, as many of you will know, a poet. I'm a performance poet who has written about and performed about how dangerous poetry can be. But it turns out that it's not just that Byron was mad, bad and dangerous to know, it's that actually poetry itself can be seriously dangerous in the real world. And it can be dangerous because it seems that the guardrails placed around AI to stop it doing bad things, when people prompt it to do bad things, can be thrown off their guard by phrasing the request in poetry. So this is the result of a fascinating paper called, rather catchily, Adversarial Poetry as a Universal Single-Turn Jailbreak in Large Language Models, LLMs, close bracket. And what that dry title hides is the fact that if you were to tell or ask AI to do something bad and just ask it, it would tell you, no, I can't do that. If you ask it in poetry, then if that poetry, interestingly, is human crafted, then 62% of the time it will do what you want it to do. Ignore its guardrails and help you to do the bad thing. Interestingly, if the poetry prompt you have created has in turn been created by AI, then it's only 40-something% successful. So it seems human poetry is better at getting AIs to break their own guard rules than AI-generated poetry. So there we go. We end the week with something that humans truly are, for the moment at least, better than AI at doing. And so, on that bombshell, to use an unfortunate phrase in that context. I will leave you and very much look forward to speaking to you again at the same time next week.
You've been listening to Self-Publishing with ALLi, proudly sponsored by PublishMe, helping indie authors succeed globally with expert translation, tailored marketing, and publishing support. From first draft to international launch, PublishMe ensures your book reaches readers everywhere. Visit publishme.me, and if you haven't already, we invite you to join our association and become a self-publishing ally. You could do that at allianceindependentauthors.org.